Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Sports Card Lessons podcast with me, your host, Ken Cairns. Don't forget to hit me up on social media on Instagram at Sports Card Lessons _ lessons. And you can also find me on YouTube by searching Sports Card Lessons. And if you like what you hear, please like, subscribe. Most importantly, tell a friend, spread the word. What is up, everybody? So excited today. I got my guy, Rob Gerard. You guys know him as at Sports Card Therapist. He's got his own podcast. He does The Bounce with Amel Serfani, my very good friend, my show partner, my very first guest. Rob, how are you doing?
Ken, what's going on, man? Listen, I am excited to be on. I'm feeling super good about being here. Um, yeah, man, I'm just super happy for you, man. I haven't missed an episode yet. You're really laying the groundwork for something good here with sports card lessons, man.
You know, it's interesting. I think about where I am in the hobby, where I am in this podcast, and I owe a lot of it to you. And that's why you really needed to be my first guest on here. I mean, absolutely, hands down, had to be my first guest. Where I am in this hobby, where I am with my podcast, literally, I would be not even be close to being here without you.
Well, listen, man, I think one of the reasons why you and I click so well, despite, a bit of an age difference, I think we're probably about 16 years apart in age. So I mean, 16 years, that's a generation,
Yeah, yeah,
but I mean, I feel like you and I just totally clicked from the start. And I think it's because I think we're just so much alike. And I think we lead with kindness for the most part, or we try to lead with kindness. We're sponges. We're just forever teachable. I know in any conversation I'm ever having, whether if it's about cards or just life in general, I'm a sponge. And when you asked me about the whole podcast thing, um, you know, I hope it came across I was absolutely your biggest cheerleader, and I love teaching people stuff. So I was loving kind of teaching you from just the beginning of how to start a podcast, just with like what tools you need, microphone and stuff, all the way up to like us spitballing ideas. I mean, I think it's great, man, because I get ideas about my show from our conversations.
yeah.
So I mean, we're borrowing from each other.
Yeah, and a lot of this happens in the car on the way to these shows. I mean, my podcast, this Sports Card _ lessons, this podcast was born in the car at 5 or 5:30 in the morning on the way to New Jersey, right? I mean, this is the things we talk about, that and yeah, I think we complement each other well. And one thing I like about you that I see in myself is we're very calm. Like we never get too excited. Nothing pushes us over the edge. And I really when I'm around people, I like people like that. I like people that can stay calm because to me there's nothing better than that. There's nothing worse than having somebody that's overly excited all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I tell you, there's I think especially when you're talking about business, and really, even though the cards are hobby, it's a hobby for us. It's still business at the end of the day because we're still dealing with money, we're still dealing with transactions and emotions. I think the last thing we want is a loose cannon around us, someone that like we don't know what they could do.
Yeah.
That's not anything. What you if you're going to war, if you're going to a show, and it could feel like a war in there, just like the chaotic nature of these big shows we do. I think you want someone by your side that you can trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can rely on. I mean, we really, and I talk about this on the podcast all the time, how much we rely on each other at these shows, to from watching each other's tables or just to get ideas. What do you think of that? What do you think of this? And I think I come to you more. I think, you have more hobby information than I do. I'm still young in the hobby, even though I've been doing it for a while. I learning so much all the time. Every show, I learn more. Um, and it's unbelievable. Not that the way we work together, right? We travel together, but when we're at the shows, we can set up right next to each other, and there's no way we even step on each other. Our cases are completely different. Our lanes in the hobby are different. Yeah, it's just a really good partnership.
Yeah, man, definitely. And I know whenever I'm making a move, whether if I'm thinking about one or if I'm making one, I think it's always good to have, kind of like that partner in crime, that someone that you can trust, that you could either bounce stuff off of or share good news with, and that they'll be genuinely happy for you. So, every day, basically, I'm calling you or you're calling me. We're having conversations every day, and it's like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm thinking, or this is definitely what I'm doing going into national. This is what I'm doing here, there. This is my thinking behind this. And so yeah, man. I mean, even if you're not setting up at shows, just having someone, a small network of people that you can depend on is key, and to enjoy the hobby with, because this is a
Yeah,
hobby that I think deserves to be shared.
yeah, and you have to enjoy it. You absolutely, you put so much time. You don't put this much time into anything else. So if you don't enjoy this, you're doing it wrong, right? Or you need to be somewhere else. This you have to enjoy. I don't know. Like, I know what I was doing. I knew what my background was before I came to the hot. My hobby before I started with this was I used to go to the casino all the time. So coming into this hobby, you would think that I take a lot of chances, and my mindset was a lot of in the wax, because I think that's where the thrill is. You try to
Hmm.
hit that big card in a pack of wax, but for the most part, I feel that I've always tried to play it safe and smart when it came to bigger deals. And watching you over these last, few months, I realized the safe and the smart, lets you move up, inches at a time. But I think when watching you and seeing how you take chances, that it really pays off for you. It's starting to change my mind. I'm almost breaking out of my shell, to say, okay, I'm not going to be as safe and smart. I'm gonna take a few risks. I'm going to take a chance.
Well, and you know what? Yet again, another way how we are absolutely alike, because as I got back in the hobby probably about 2 years ago, right? Kind of the same time everyone did. Everyone kind of got back into the hobby,
Was
and
there anything that put you back into the hobby? Was there any one thing that drew you back in and said, "Oh, I want to do this again"?
you know No, it's so weird. So I grew up, collecting in the junk wax era, like a lot of us. Probably around like 95, put cards away. That was when I was like 12. So I was born in 82. By the time 95 comes around, I'm thinking more about girls and stuff like that. And I put cards away for about 15 years. Then around 2010, 2011, I got back in for only about 6 months. But what I was doing was I was because I had no cards left from childhood. So what I was doing was I was going on eBay and I was buying these big lots of players who I grew up collecting, Joe Montana, Michael Jordan, Ken Griffey Jr., Frank Thomas. I'm buying all these players that I grew up, collecting. Magic Johnson, all them. So Charles Barkley. And I got those, put them in binders. And then within 6 months, I had them in binders under my bed again. So then I got back in right around the time of the pandemic, and I had no idea sports cards had exploded again. I think I probably came back in the beginning of the pandemic, before it was like making mainstream national news. Um, I just remember being bored outside cleaning my patio, like spring of 2020, just being bored. I had just gotten in the podcasts, and I'm like, huh, what podcast do I want to listen to? I don't think I want to listen to self-help. Um, and I was like, let me search some sports cards podcasts. I wonder if there's any out there. And sure enough, I stumbled upon one, stumbled upon two. Before you know it, I went down that rabbit hole, Facebook groups. And before you know it, that's what, kind of how I did it. But I think my reason for saying that, for getting back into that, was to tell you that, like, when I got back into, man, especially when I started my podcast, Sports Card Therapist, my whole philosophy was goats over prospecting, because I've heard horror stories of people investing money in these young players prospecting and then just losing a ton of money. And in my opinion, for me, cards has always been about nostalgia. So I wanted to collect some of the goats that I grew up watching, and even some of the goats that I never got a chance to watch, like Mickey Mantle, because for me, it was still nostalgic. My dad grew up idolizing Mickey Mantle. He would always talk about Mickey Mantle. I can remember him buying one single Mickey Mantle card for himself because that's all he could afford, because we were lower, we were on that lower income bracket. And so, but even cards that I would see in magazines growing up, like a Wilt Chamberlain rookie, which I just happen to have right next to me right now that I have, let me see. I could remember seeing this card in a magazine growing up. Wilt Chamberlain rookie. Here I am. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm showing the camera, and here I am now owning it. So it's like I've always been about goats over prospecting. However, I've set my goals to be a little bit more lofty in these last probably 6 months or so, and so I have been, I've taken off the life jacket and I'm
Yeah.
swimming in the deep end, and I'm taking some risks, and some of these risks are panning out, and some other risks, the outcome hasn't been determined yet. So we'll see.
I know you just had a couple really big deals go through, and those were risks. In fact, the last one anyways was prospecting, right? And when you did it, and I listened to, and we have our little group, and people are, they were cheering you on, but I think you'd think that, I hope it was a good idea. I hope it was the right time. And was it a little risky? And then it really paid off for you. And I think it really, I know it opened my eyes, it really opened my eyes that I'm probably going to take a little bit more of a chance and get a little bit more riskier. Not so much because I think I could hit a home run with it, but I think the lane that I'm in and what I'm doing with the cards is the safe lane. I'm in the slow lane, right? And I'm cruising along and I'm making a few dollars and I'm really having fun. But I really want something now to get the heart pumping, right? You make a big deal. Like, I watch you, I see what happens when you're making that deal. I see the sweat start coming up on your forehead, right? I can see your pulse in your neck. Like that's the kind of the exciting thing, that I think I want to kind of get in that lane, or at least try it out. At least put my feet in the deep end just a little bit, right?
Yeah, definitely. And for some of your listeners that might not be familiar, I think the deal you're talking about is a deal that I just made about a little under 2 weeks ago. We were at the New Jersey trade show, and well, I'm going to give this super short abbreviated version. So I spent probably about 8 months accumulating some of my Grail cards. I mean, Michael Jordan rookie BGS 9. That right there is 15, 16K. LeBron James Topps Chrome Refractor rookie PSA 8. That right there is 15, 16K. The LeBron Chalk Toss Topps Chrome Refractor PSA 10. That was probably about 6K right there. So, I had a few bigger cards, and someone came up to my table in late February. You were right there next to me, and offered to buy out some of my bigger cards, and put 30K cash on the table and said, I'll take these cards at 75 to 80% comps if you want to do it. And I did it. I took their money. And so I took that cash and I invested it in 2 single cards. And that was a Ja Morant National Treasure bronze RPA out of 49, and a Jason Tatum flawless RPA rookie patch auto gold out of 10. And that was only about 5 weeks later. We went back to that same New Jersey show, same tables and everything, and the same guys that bought out my 30K came up to me and bought my Jason Tatum for me, and I paid 7K for that Jason Tatum, and 5 weeks later I was able to flip it for 13K. So I made almost 100%. I mean, what can you do in life ever aside from selling drugs Can you ever make that kind of flip? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it's and they're not all going to be like that, because if they were all like that, then everyone would be doing it, and then it wouldn't happen anymore because everyone would be doing it. So then it wouldn't, so, but it doesn't always happen like that. And but it happened for me. So I'm taking that 13K and I am trying my very best to make really smart plays moving forward so I could turn that 13K into 25 or 30K.
Nice. Nice. Now, did you feel when you bought the two cards, did you feel that was risky? I'm not going to say lose sleep over it. Did you worry about it when you bought the cards? Did you think to yourself, maybe I made a mistake, or maybe a long time before I can flip these because of the time of year and the season of the sport?
So great question, Ken. Not for a second did I think I was making a mistake. However, when you ask about was there any regret there, first of all, I knew I didn't make a mistake as far as an investment goes, is because everyone that knows more than me about the hobby was telling me what a good move it was to buy those two cards, unsolicited. They were saying, Rob, those are some big cards right there. Those are cards that, and I'm like, yeah. So I felt good about them. But in the back of my mind, I was like, when it comes to cards and we're trying to level up, right? And I'm not saying we're flipping and stuff. We're not flippers, but yeah, we're trying to level up. We're trying to buy cards at a certain price and then move cards at a certain price to get bigger cards at a certain price. So when I bought those cards, I know there's a limited buyer pool for those kinds of cards. So in my head, I just took 30 grand of my inventory and basically put it in a safe. And 30 grand of my inventory is a lot of my inventory. So I felt like it kind of took me out of the game a little bit. So after I made those two purchases, I found myself making less sales, making less purchases, doing less flips and less deals and less trades, because 30K of my inventory was tied up. So I had no idea how long I would hold those cards for. Now I still have the Ja Morant, the National Treasure RPA. And for me, and from what people that know more than me say, if Ja Morant becomes what they think he could become, even if he can manage to win a single ring in the next 2 years, his prices will probably do what Giannis prices did and what Luka prices did. And this card could immediately overnight go to $100,000 card. And within 5 years, it could become a $250,000 card. So when I think about that, I'm like, okay, I made the right choice. But I didn't know if I'd be holding these cards for years. Now, I want to tell you something, because I don't think I told you about this, Ken. So the top two cards when it comes to high-end cards, right? The top two brands typically are National Treasures and Flawless, right? So National Treasures and Flawless are probably the most comparable, although National Treasures definitely has the brand recognition and the name recognition. So I think it's safe to say National Treasures will always be worth a little bit more than Flawless, just because of the legacy and the brand and just the recognition. But they're very comparable. So I just sold my Jason Tatum gold RPA out of 10 Flawless for 13K. You want to know what the Jason Tatum National Treasures gold out of 10 RPA just sold for?
Tell me.
172,000.
There's that much difference. That much difference between 150,000 plus difference between the two names.
Well, I'm not telling all the facts.
Okay.
So the one that sold for National Treasures is the vertical version, and the Flawless that I had was the horizontal version.
Okay.
But other than that, those are the facts. So to me, it definitely felt like, even though I doubled my money in 5 weeks,
Yeah.
it still feels like I sold too early. It's like, so I think it just tells me that I got a hell of a deal when I bought it for $7K.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is because when you have cash, money talks.
Yeah.
When I made those two purchases, I had straight cash. I wasn't coming to them trying to offer half trade and half cash, which is what I do with a lot of my deals. A lot of my deals, that's how I level up in this hobby, is most of the time I try to offer part trade, part cash. And when I bought these two cards, I came with all cash, and all cash talks. And I think I would bought it at the right time. NBA was in a bit of a lull. It was in a bit of a dull period right around the midseason point. And, I bought at the right time, and I think I sold at the right time. So a lot of it is time in the market.
Yeah. I wonder how that guy feels that sold it to you. Like, I think I sold that at the wrong time.
But you know what, though? I think about, how many, I think
And he may have gotten into that for 3,500, right? And sold it to you for
100%,
7,000.
100%.
Yeah.
So, you know, the guy that actually, there were two guys that bought the Jason Tatum from me at the show last week, and they messaged me on Instagram and just saying, like, thank you for the deal, blah, blah, blah. I listened to the podcast, great job, love your podcast. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I told him, I said, man, I hope you guys kill it with this card. I hope you could 4x your money. I hope Tatum wins it all and you can 4x your money, because, I hope we all win.
Yeah. And that's unbelievable. You just think about it. You bought this card for 7,000. You sold it for 13,000. 5 weeks later, and you went on the pod and you were told the whole deal. And the guy that knows that you bought it for 7 and he sold it to him for 13, he's thanking you for the deal.
Yeah.
I mean, where else could that happen?
Yeah. And the crazy thing about, one reason why I feel really comfortable with starting to deal in the high end market, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't we all want to deal in the high end market? Don't we all want to deal in cards in 5K or more?
Yeah.
Of course we do. But the thing is, when you start dealing with cards like that, like a National Treasure RPA, a flawless RPA, you are dealing with the top 1% of that player's market. Chances are, it doesn't matter what cards come out for the rest of this player's life, they will never crack that 1% that a flawless or National Treasure RPA will. And these are truly collectible items. So if you're a Jason Tatum collector, or if you're a John Morant collector, if you're any of these guys, if you're a strong collector, you feel like you have to have that card. You have to have that card. And when it comes to collectors, when it comes to players, and when it comes to the market, all you really need are 75 people in the world, 75 to 100 people, to decide, like, I think I'm going to become a Jason Tatum collector, to completely have a seismic shift on the entire market for Jason Tatum. That's
Yeah.
all you need. So that's why when these guys win rings and people start jumping on the bandwagon as far as rooting for teams or rooting for players, when these guys win, all it takes are 75 collectors to go in on a player to truly make that player's cards just skyrocket.
Yeah. And when these players come out, even as their rookie year, so I'm just going to say this card that you just sold, the year that card came out, what would that card have sold for? Is that card in a lane that only certain people could afford for the most part, or is this a card that anybody? I mean, National Treasures, first of all, is an expensive box, right? But I mean, I'm just wondering, like, for anybody, even like myself, like let's just say, and it's prospecting. I say, I'm going to take a guy this year who's a rookie, and I'm going to go buy that National Treasures card or whatever. Really, what am I looking to spend in that? And am I putting myself in a lane that most people aren't in?
Well, here's the thing. It depends. Are you planning on buying a National Treasure RPA of the number one pick of the draft? Or are you planning on buying a National Treasure RPA of the 23rd pick in the draft, because he's got a strong team and they're without a point guard, and this guy's a point guard, so he's probably going to start this year, and he's going to a strong team as it is, and you have faith in not only the player but the team.
Mhm.
If that's the case, I would imagine it's a lot cheaper. Now, if you want to pick, if you want the number 1 pick in the draft or the number 2 pick in the draft, National Treasure RPA, I mean, right off the bat, you could be looking at a $50,000 card.
Yeah.
But if you're going for that 23rd player in the draft, you might be able to get it for $2K.
Yeah.
And watch him, 50x if he goes on to win a championship.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many people do get into breaks, because no one can afford that $50,000 number 1 draft pick. But if I buy into a break, then I at least have the chance to do that. And I think how I feel about breaks. I don't do breaks. I've done a single break in my life, and that was just to say I did.
Yeah.
And it was, I think breaks you've had some pretty decent luck, I think, but for me,
but not
you
all the
can miss
time.
me with the breaks.
Yeah, not all the time, but you know what? That's my mentality too. A lot of times, and I have a lot of free time on my hands, right? So a lot of times, and I talk about this on my podcast, that I look for the odds, right?
Yeah.
I go, and if I see boxes that are going to be broke, or even if I want to buy a hobby box of something, I go on to YouTube and I watch 15, 20, 25, 30 of those boxes being opened, just to see what the general, like, are they pulling decent cards out of every box? Are people getting their money back out of the box, or is it you just have to be very lucky? And there's a lot of boxes where you literally have to be extremely lucky to get your money back, to pull that one card out of the box. And I stay away from all those. I mean, I don't even get involved in those. But then there's other sports, right? Like some soccer boxes and UFC and other sports where there's just a lot of hits in the box. Now, the box may be expensive, but you'll pull out of there maybe 5, 8, 10 cards that are you could sell and make some money on. So I understand the frowned upon of the break, but I think there's certain ones, if you can get into, you could do well.
Yeah. No, definitely. And like I said, it seems like you've done well. I know you've told me a lot about your wins. You don't share your losses as much.
No, I don't share the losses like the wins, because the wins are so much better.
Yeah.
That first few weeks when I started getting into breaks, and I hit the Patrick Mahomes, 1 of 10 on card auto redemption. Right. I saw a post on Facebook today. Somebody said, "Hey, I put a redemption in. I've been waiting 3 months. Any idea how long it takes?" And it was with Panini. And then people were responding back. It was hysterical. Somebody said, "I've been waiting 8 years for an auto card, and I've been waiting 6 years, and don't expect it in the next decade," type of thing. So. As much as I was excited about that card, I've come to the point where I'm probably never going to see that card. So what did it do? It got me very excited, and it kept me going for a while into breaks. But then at the end of the day, I thought, really, that was a loss. That hurt me. That win hurt me more than helped me.
Yeah. And listen, I think if I can give any kind of public service announcement to people, it's, buy singles, don't buy into breaks. For everyone that gets a nice hit in a break, there's 100 other behind him that didn't get that hit.
Yeah.
And you think about how much money people spend trying to chase some of these cards, and if you spend that money on singles, you'll end up with the collection of a lifetime.
Yeah. Yep. It's exactly true. It's exactly true. And I did a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the hockey hobby box that I wanted, just to get these 2 particular cards. And I bought 2 hobby boxes, and I didn't get either of them. And the hobby boxes together, the NHL Series 1, cost, $125 each. So I paid the $250 and I didn't get the 2 guys that I wanted, the hot rookies. And then I went out and just bought their Young Guns rookie cards, right, for $125 each. So at the end of the day, it cost me $500 for $250 worth of cards. So yeah, you're right. It's as much as you think you're going to hit. It's just, you got to be lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, man, I mean, getting back in the hobby and, just It's so much fun, man. And the whole having a podcast thing too for me, it's just been an absolute hobby hack,
Where, where,
meaning
where did you get the idea? I mean, what said to you, I want to start this podcast, and what lane did you want to be in with the podcast?
well, I tell you, man, just like with my previous answers I gave you, I have to backtrack before I can lead up to that answer. So for in my 20s, for probably about 5 or 6 years, I had a radio show on college radio and University of New Haven, and I had a hip hop show. I'm a huge hip hop head. I grew up listening to hip hop. I loved it, 90s hip hop, and so I had a radio show that I hosted, and I had my DJ who would do a lot of the mixes, and I would be the one on the mic talking and stuff like that. And I just loved it. So I was always like super comfortable being on the mic and stuff. And when that ended, probably a couple years later, I started up a mental health podcast because I'm a licensed therapist. So I started up a mental health podcast and just kind of talking about overall self-care, but like adding like a cool kind of twist to it, showing that like therapy can be cool, and self-care and self-awareness isn't lame. You know what I mean? Because I'm not your typical therapist. It's like I ride a Harley Davidson, I have tattoos, I listen to hip hop, I had a radio show. So it's like that's not your typical therapist. So the mental health podcast, really, I think probably didn't work out because, I had a co-host, I had a female co-host, and it was kind of my brainchild. But I think it just didn't work for whatever reasons. So when I got back into the hobby, I'm like, I like the content that's out there, but I would love to document my journey of getting back into the hobby and everything I'm going through, because I know there's a lot of people out there like me. And then also, if I can mix in some mental health and some self-help awareness with the card collecting, I searched. There's nothing like that at all. Nothing like that out there. So I basically took my previous podcast, which was the mental health podcast, and kind of merged that with sports cards and kind of turned that into sports card therapist.
Nice. I mean, I thought too, when I was thinking about coming on and doing, and we talked about this as a podcast, when I came up with the idea of sports card lessons, it was similar to the same thing. It's just I had all this great advice, and I kind of didn't listen to it at first. I still wanted to. I still had to learn the hard way at a few things, and similar. It just felt like there was a lane that that I could jump into, and with yours, listening to you do it, it's like, man, this guy is so good at it. Anybody could do this, right? I mean, that's what you think. You're driving in the car and you're like, man, I know this guy. He sounds great on the radio. I could do this.
Well, and yeah, no, and I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think it is pretty easy, um, but sometimes it could be difficult being yourself when there's a microphone in front of you.
Yeah,
That's the thing. If you can kind of overcome that mental barrier and that anxiety, and just kind of be comfortable with what you're doing,
yeah,
um, but you also have to really know your stuff. You can't get up here on the microphone, especially when you're doing a solo podcast. When you're interviewing someone and you have a guest on, at least for me, it's almost like throwing me a life raft. It's like, okay, this is easy. I could do this all day.
yeah,
I could talk with a guest all day long.
yeah,
But when it's just you and the microphone, there's nowhere to hide.
yeah,
There's nowhere to hide. There's no music playing. There's no breaks. There's
no,
no nothing. So if you don't know your stuff, within probably 60 to 90 seconds, people start to be like, what the hell is he even saying? He's not even making sense. Like,
yeah.
what's,
Or if you lose
what?
your train of thought,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, no, definitely, man. So, it's, I think it's a little bit of really knowing your stuff, and then being able to be comfortable with being yourself with a microphone and a camera in front of you.
yeah. I always say there's nothing easier to talk about, your lived experiences. like to be able to come out and just talk about what you've been through and things that you've done. I mean, that's because that stuff comes from the heart. I mean, you can't fake that stuff. You can't make that stuff up. It's just coming. You're just recalling from memory and talking about it. And I find that to be the easiest thing to talk about. And you're my first guest, right? So you're my first guest on here. So this is really kind of good for me. I'm a little bit more relaxed today. It's nice. I know what you're saying. It's nice to throw some questions, over, and then kind of just sit back and get the information a little bit. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice thing.
And I think when we talked about, when you were mentioning how you were kind of prepping for a podcast and stuff, I mean, I didn't have a doubt in my mind that it would be a home run for you. The only thing is, how would it translate on the mic? And I think you've done an incredible job, because, I know when you and I talk, you're absolutely one of the most interesting people I've ever met. I mean, hands down, absolutely one of the most interesting people. I could talk to you for days and days and days. I mean, I think about, how many hours we've probably spent in a car together. And I don't know if there's ever really, first of all, we can have comfortable silences. Like there's no uncomfortable silences with us. Like we're to that point now where we can just sit there and not say anything, and it's totally comfortable. But there really isn't much silence because all we do is just talk.
Yeah.
And I think we're just two talkative people who like learning, and we like learning from each other and everything else, So the idea of you doing a podcast, I said, well, it'll be a home run as long as it can transfer onto the microphone.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like it has, man. I haven't missed an episode, and you've been incredible. And I think I've told you that, listening to your first 5 episodes, and I think back to my first 5 episodes, hands down, your first 5 were probably better than mine. I was really feeling myself out. Whereas you, I think it seemed like it was a bit more of a smoother transition for you. So,
yeah, I have a great mentor too, right? I mean, I learned from, honestly, I mean, we talk and I learn
yeah.
from, you say, hey, when I did this, these are the kind of the mistakes I think I made at the beginning, and you pass that on to me. I mean, even as far as starting this, like I know other people who are starting podcasts and now they're calling me up. They're like, oh, how do you do this? I don't know how to do that. I think I've done it. I don't know how to get it here. How do I get it to be an MP3 or an MP4? And who does all your work for you, with the music and the voice and like literally, if I would have had to start that on my own, I'd still been trying to get it done. Right. I mean, you were just such a huge help to gave me, pointed out and said, hey, just do this, and that. And it's worked. I mean, I didn't have to worry about all that stuff. All I had to worry about was just putting out good content. Right. So that I have to thank you for that. I mean, it's just unbelievable how well you held my hand and walked me through that.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate that, but it was that I have fun doing that kind of stuff. That's enjoyment for me because, just like with anything, it's almost like information and teaching is almost like love. Like you get more of it the more you give, kind of thing. So every time I help someone do something like that, all it does is reinforce my skills and sharpens my sword. And I think that's why, I love the idea of being a teacher, and you and we both worked in corrections, and you were an actual teacher, and even though I'm a clinician, a counselor, I was still facilitating groups. That was my primary job. And so, when I'm facilitating groups with inmates, with lifers, I'm basically teaching.
Yeah, you're a
So
teacher.
yeah, so I absolutely enjoy being able to teach, and I think about how many people in my life have been there for me and have held my hand and walked me through things. And it's almost like, I think about like a chain, like a chain in this necklace, you know what I mean, that I'm wearing. It's like if this chain is only whole because every single part along the way, if one of those people in my life that was there for me chose to not be there, that entire chain link could have been broken. And now it's like, now I'm somewhere completely different. Now I never meet you. I never meet, I never do a podcast. I never get back into sports cards, all because that one person back in 2007 spent 3 months with me at my job, teaching me something random,
Yeah.
So I love it, man. So we're the sum of every experience and
Yeah.
every person we've ever met in our life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's well said. Definitely well said. We talk about all the time the universe puts us on certain paths, right? And we don't know how we got here. And we look back and we say we can never do it again. There's no way we could go back 5 years or 10 years and say, I'm going to do everything to get back to this one spot, because it would never happen. But somehow we made it here, and I'm glad we did. Yeah.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And on my podcast, Sports Card Therapist, I talk a lot about the law of attraction because I totally believe in the law of attraction, and I'm not someone that's like some like hokey kind of out in the woods, meditating kind of person. But I truly believe that if you put out good energy, you get good energy. I believe in the whole karma aspect, and I believe that if you truly set goals and you work to achieve those goals, anything is achievable. So
Yeah.
when it comes to this hobby, at the beginning of this year, right at the beginning of season 2 of my podcast, episode 51, because after 50 episodes, at the 50th episode, I cut it off. I gave myself a 2-week break. Boom, came back for season 2. And I opened up season 2 and said, my goal for 2022 is to obtain $100,000 sports card. $100,000 card, a 6-figure card. Now, is there any difference if it's 95K or 110K? No. But my thing is, I know, first of all, I know people, I've met people in this hobby that have worked their way up from $30,000 cards to all of a sudden purchasing $100,000 cards. And that $100,000 card, within a 3-year period, they were able to sell for over $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I want to make the absolute smartest play I can, but be razor focused on my goal. And
Yeah.
all these moves and all these flips that I've been making, I'm hoping is going to help me attain that $100,000 card. And I actually have a couple of those cards, exactly what those cards are in mind. I speak about everything publicly, like on the podcast and stuff, but I haven't actually spoken about what those cards are that I've had in my mind. So I'm going to keep those on the hush. But there's a couple cards that are around $100,000 right now that I truly believe can be $1 million cards within like 10 years. So
Nice.
those are the kind of cards that I am in the hunt for.
Mm-hmm. So now I know you, and we've done all these shows together, and I know how hard it is for you to hold on to a card. It's so it's going to take firm hands there to either that or loose hands to keep flipping till you get there, right? One or the other. We always say you make these big deals, and you say, "All right, I'm gonna take my time." And I say, "Yep, by Tuesday, I'm getting a phone call or a text with a picture of the new card you bought." So,
And you
uh,
know what? So, just to tell a little inside story, because I don't think I told this on my podcast or anything, but so, I sell the Jason Tatum card 2 weeks ago in New Jersey, and you and I are driving home together. I have about 15K in my pocket, and I said, listen, I need you to do me a favor, Ken. I need you to make sure I don't spend this money because we have a show at Hofstra University in Long Island in 2 weeks, and I want to go there with all of this money because I want to get some deals and I want to buy cards from people that are coming to our table. So I need you to stay on me about this. Within about 3 days, almost all the money's gone. I think
lots of pictures.
I've spent about 12K already out of the 15. But let me tell you something.
Yes. Well,
Almost, almost every card though that I've purchased so far, I've traded up into. So I've done part cash, part trade. So instead of me buying a $4,000 card with 4K cash, I'm spending 2K and then I'm trading 2K. And then so not only and I'm buying during off season.
yeah,
So, I'm trying to invest that money in a football right now because I know football's not hot. People are not talking about football right now. People are talking about the baseball season starting and basketball playoffs. So
yeah,
football's kind of still on the back burner. Football's still on the back burner to probably about June, maybe early July. And then that's when I'm planning on unleashing all these cards that I've been hoarding for the last few months, football. And I'm hoping with those cards at National, you and I are going to be setting up, right? I'm hoping that after national, I'm able to make that move into that 100K card. That's how confident I am with my strategy. I'm thinking that I'm not going to need the full 12 months of 2022. I'm thinking I'm only going to need 8 months.
Oh, so by August.
By August, if all goes according to plan, I should be in a position to pull the trigger on a $100,000 card.
And we're going to be doing an episode just like this. I'm talking about that $100,000 card. You know, it's funny, you know, and I know you believe in this, and I know it was New Year's Eve last year, and you sent, we have our little our wolf pack chat,
Yep.
you know, a group of us guys in the hobby, and you sent out, you know, top 5 for next year, right?
Yep.
Everybody to fill out a top 5. And the interesting thing is I have 3 of my 5 cards already that I put on there, and I've had them, you know, for like literally by I think February, you know, maybe March at the latest. I had 3 of those 5 cards, and I didn't aim that high because, you know, that's me. There was my lane I was in. I'm playing it safe and playing it smart, and you know, the other 2 now, I think I'm just gonna forget about the other 2 and just go really big. You know, go
Definitely.
start looking. You know, and we talked about this, you know, earlier. The cards that, you know, I'm just going to start leveling up. I've been selling just a lot of my, you know, my lower end cards just to start, you know, purchasing a couple higher end cards. And I talked about that. I'm going to say, because it's kind of funny to say, I talked about that on last week's podcast, but last week's podcast hasn't been released yet. So
yeah, I know.
You know, but by the time this comes out, it's going to be last week, right? So, you know, I just talked about that on my pod, saying, you know, I'm just starting to move all these cards, and I'm starting to, just like you did, I'm learning from you, you know, my mentor, right? Just starting to trade up, sell up, and to start putting, you know, a lot more expensive fire in my cases at these shows, and start, you know, eliminating the bottom end.
Absolutely. And you know, really everything I do in this hobby, or everything I'm thinking, I process it with you basically. So, you know, I told you that I have 3 cases that I usually set up with. And I said, moving forward, I'm not bringing 3 cases. I refuse to. I'm only bringing 2. And that's going to force me to truly consolidate. There's no reason why I should have a 3rd case that has $15 slabs in there. Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? You know, 15. No, you know, I'm truly fully consolidating now. You know, we know guys that set up and they have, you know, a single case and they have $100,000 in those cases. And I know it's not so much about the money, but at the end of the day, you know, when you're doing these shows, it's about the value of the cards, right? We want, you know, and if someone says they don't care about the value of their cards going up or down, I I gotta say they're lying. Like we all want bigger, better, badder cards. And because I think it's a challenge for us, right? Like it's like if you can drop me in the middle of a jungle, buck naked with nothing, and I can come out wearing a chinchilla fur, eating a hog, you know, that's a badge of honor. If you
Yeah.
can drop me in this hobby and say, now go make money flipping cards, you know what? That's a badge of honor too.
Yep.
So there's no difference between dropping me in a jungle and dropping me at a card show where the place is just buzzing. I absolutely want to challenge myself to make the best moves and level up to the best of my potential. And don't get me wrong, I have my PC. You have your PC in your case behind you. I have my PC and my glass case behind me. Like I have my PC cards that I'm not moving, but I also have my inventory of stuff that I'm just constantly trying to move up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, one thing I talk about too is it's a lot of work. You know, my table at the shows have been very congested, right? Just because I have a lot going on, and it's a lot of work for me. It's 3, 4, 5 hours during the week to get ready for the show, and then when I get there, I've got to set all this stuff up, and you know, you see, I'm selling a ton of stuff and making, you know, X amount of money, and somebody's selling 1 card and making the same amount. I said, you know, my time is more important, you know, so I want to get more into the hobby where I can show up to these shows, set my case up, and then just like you do, walk off and go find some deals, right? And not be so you know, overwhelmed with setting everything up and doing that, packing the car. And I mean, I showed up to pick you up and I got half the car full. You show up with a couple cases in a box and we're trying to fit them in. I'm like, I got way too much stuff here. I really need to start eliminating, so yeah. And that's really my goal too. Now we talked about this moving forward is just to have, a few cases and that's it. Just some just better cards in there, something that I could move up at any moment. I could be ready to move up, so people that have the cards to move up to, you need cards to move into that lane, right? You can't have $60 slabs and $90 slabs and $125 slabs and and realistically move into a $3,000 or $4,000 card or a $5,000 card. You need to have, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 slabs in your case if you want to be moving up to that. And that's the lane I want to be in. And I think that's you're in that lane, moving to a higher lane.
Yeah, and I think about the phases that I've gone through in this hobby, and I think a lot of us have probably gone through similar ones, but I've gone through my phases where every single night I was glued to eBay. Every single night I was glued to eBay to the point where my wife was like, "Rob, you are on your phone too much. What are you doing on your phone?" Every single day I was getting 3 to 5 packages in the mail every single day, every single day. And what I realized was it wasn't even so much about the card. It was something about the transaction. And I started to realize, like, I think it's almost like becoming addicted to shopping, right? Because, the shopping addiction, that is definitely is one of those kind of secondary addictions that people struggle with. And I think that's what was happening. But what was happening also was I was ending up with a ton of like $30 to $60 cards that just weren't moving. So it's like no one wants these cards. I bought them for 30. I'm hoping to sell them for 45, but no one's buying them, especially when they go on eBay and they look up the card and they see it was just bought for 30.
Yeah.
Now they want to buy it for 20. And it's like, what am I doing here? So I had to make a conscious effort to stop spending on eBay. And when I was able, I think that was my biggest struggle. My biggest struggle was finally stopping spending, and I had to stop cruising eBay. I had to stop just opening up the app, because I was opening up the eBay app as much as I was opening up Instagram or Facebook. And we open up those apps, between 10 and 50 times a day.
Yeah.
So,
Always check your watch list and
yep.
your purchase history and what's coming in the mail today. And yeah, and we've talked about this. I mean, that the worst part about it is if you're buying on there and you put it in your case, the next person shows up at the show and they pull up your sale right there on the phone and they know exactly what you paid for it. And they don't want to pay $1 more. So if you want to move the card, you've done all the work for nothing. And then you got to add shipping on it. Nobody ever calculates shipping. They never say, "Oh, geez, you bought the card for $150, but it was $10 shipping, and and then tax on top of it," right? So
100%, 100%.
yeah,
So, and or even worse, if you buy a $25 card, and between tax and shipping, yeah, like you said, ends up being like $8 to $10 between tax and shipping. So that $25 card, someone wants to buy it from me for 20, but I spent 33 on it. So in what business can you stay in business when you're losing 33% of every card? You
yeah,
can't. So what I had to do, it wasn't so much about breaking the habit of buying the smaller cards. It was about breaking the habit of spending in general.
yeah, yeah. And that's where I'm at now. I mean, literally, that's where the point I've gotten to now. And it's not so much just spending, but it's just uh, money well spent, right? Instead of buying, a bunch of $100 and $150 things, right? I'll take all those and buy a $900 or $1,000 card, right? So in my mind, that's where I'm at now. I'm not going to be buying these low end, and I say 1,000. I would say maybe from 500 up there, 500, 700, 800. That's where my starting point is. That's what I want to find, but it's not going to be on eBay, right? It definitely has to be off of eBay. It's going to be, Instagram or Facebook groups or even at shows, from other shows. I mean, that's, the
Yeah.
lesson, right? That's the lesson. It's what you learn in the hobby. And once you get in, there's people who've been in here for years, and they're always changing, always adapting, even in today, because you see guys that have been doing this for years and they never use the internet. And they'll talk to you about, working in this hobby from a magazine and getting prices out of a magazine. And that's all anybody had to go by. And they talk about how this, the eBay and everything, it's really hurting the hobby at the shows and stuff, because they're kind of being left behind a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our upcoming shows.
Yes.
So I know we've got Hofstra as our next show, April 23rd, 24th. And we're looking forward to that show. I don't know if you're gonna have money left to spend, but
100%. Yeah. So we're doing the Hofstra show, which is going to be huge, and then after that we have the Laz show in New York City, and right in Manhattan, right across from Madison Square Garden at the New Yorker Hotel. Then the week after that, we have Autograph Fest in New Jersey, the Probstein show, Rick Probstein. That's going to be huge. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And that's so the Big Apple's a 2-day show. It's May 8th, May 9th, Saturday, Sunday, right? And I was just informed by the calendar that that's Mother's Day weekend. Mother's Day is that Sunday. So I didn't make any huge points at home with booking a show out on Mother's Day on Sunday.
Yeah. No, I know. I hear you.
And Prostein's the weekend after that. That's a 3-day show, right? That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have Mohegan Sun in June.
Mohegan Sun Casino in June. Then I think we have Springfield at the end of June. Then before you know it, we have Nationals.
Yeah. Now, are you doing the trade night at Mohegan Sun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Doing trade night.
Is it going to be as big as the Basketball Hall of Fame?
I hope so. I hope everything just continues to slowly go up, right? I hope every show we do is bigger than the last. I hope every trade night we do is bigger than the last. I hope every podcast episode has a few more streams than the last one, all of that.
Yeah. Always aiming higher.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, man, listen, I'm looking forward to it. And don't forget, listeners of Sports Card Lessons, Ken is going to be on my show, Sports Card Therapist, within the next 1 to 2 weeks. The official announcement's been made here. You're hearing it here first. He's going to be on my pod. We don't have an exact date set, but it would be within 1 to 2 weeks of this show airing. So make sure to stay tuned for that.
Nice. Looking forward to that, Rob.
Likewise.
So, hey, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being my first guest.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure, man. Are you kidding me? It is an absolute pleasure, Ken, man. I tell you, I've met few people in this life that I feel like, are as kind as you. And just a good dude overall, man. And I love the content you're putting out. I mean, you're putting out great podcasts. So just keep it up, man. Keep up what you're doing. And you're going to be a real force in this content creation avenue for sure.
Thank you. And I just want to make one comment to that. And I appreciate all those kind words.
Yeah.
When we did the first show together and I came home and Sherry said to me, "Oh, how did it go?" And I said, "You know what? Regardless if I do anything in the hobby, Rob and I will be friends for life, because he's just that kind of guy." And we just had an instant connection, and really appreciate your friendship and your mentorship in the hobby and your podcast. Unbelievable. Both of them. They're my go-to every week, your own podcast and the Bounce with Now. So thanks again for coming in and coming on, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Absolutely, man. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please tell a friend, spread the word. Until next time, be good to yourselves and everyone around you.